What if the greatest mystery surrounding the pyramids isn't how they were built, but whether we've been asking the wrong question all along? For centuries, the Great Pyramid of Giza has challenged historians, engineers, and archaeologists. Millions of precisely cut stones were transported, lifted, aligned, and assembled into one of the most extraordinary structures ever created. The traditional explanation points to ancient Egyptian workers, organized labor, ingenious engineering, and decades of construction. But then Grok AI was asked a different question: who really built the Great Pyramid? Instead of simply repeating the familiar explanation, the AI was pushed to examine the evidence: measurements, geometry, construction theories, archaeological discoveries, satellite imagery, and decades of research. And what emerged was not a simple answer. The deeper the evidence was examined, the more complicated the story became. Some measurements raise questions about how enormous stones could have been moved and positioned with such extraordinary precision. Other details challenge popular assumptions about the pyramid's construction methods, timeline, and original purpose. But here's where things get truly fascinating. This isn't about proving aliens built the pyramids. It isn't about replacing history with a conspiracy theory. It's about examining the evidence and asking whether some parts of the conventional explanation deserve another look. Because when you strip away the legends and focus on the numbers, measurements, engineering, and physical evidence, the Great Pyramid becomes even more mysterious. Like and subscribe, because what Grok's analysis reveals next gets seriously strange. Now let's go back to the beginning and examine the evidence that has puzzled experts for centuries: the mountain that shouldn't exist. Outside Cairo, there's a shape on the horizon that has no right to still be standing. 2.3 million blocks of stone, some the size of a car, some heavier than a loaded truck, stacked, fitted, and locked together with a precision so tight that in places you cannot slide a credit card between two blocks that were placed by hand 4,500 years ago. For nearly 4 millennia, this was the tallest structure human beings had ever built. Not close, not almost, the tallest, full stop. Nothing else came near it, not for 4,000 years. Empires rose, empires fell, languages died, entire civilizations turned to dust and blew away in the wind. And through all of it, this thing just stood there, unmoved, untouched, waiting for someone to finally ask it the right question. In 2024, someone did. Think about that timeline for a second, because it's genuinely hard to wrap your head around. When Cleopatra stood on this exact plateau, the pyramid behind her was already more ancient to her than the Roman Empire is to us right now. She wasn't looking at a recent wonder. She was looking at something that was already unimaginably old by the time her own civilization existed. Rome rose, Rome fell, the Dark Ages came and went, the printing press was invented, empires spanning entire oceans rose out of nothing and crumbled back into nothing. And through every single second of that, this thing just stood there, silent, unmoved, holding its secret. Nobody had the tools to actually read it. Not until now. The story you were told. Before we tear this apart, let's be fair. Let's give the textbook version its shot, because it's not stupid and it's not made up. Here's what you were taught. Around 2560 BCE, Pharaoh Khufu orders a tomb. For 20 years, tens of thousands of organized, paid workers, not slaves, actual skilled laborers, quarry limestone, drag it across wet sand on wooden sledges, haul it up ramps, and set it in place using nothing but rope, muscle, and time. Their tools: copper chisels, stone hammers, a knotted cord, a wooden square, a trench of water to check for level. And the evidence is real. Archaeologists found the workers' town, the bakeries, The breweries, skeletons with healed, broken bones, proof these people were cared for, not worked to death, and discarded. Crews scrawled their names in red paint deep inside the structure. Friends of Khufu, proud, human, real. This is not a conspiracy. This is solid archaeology. Give credit where it's due. But here's the problem, and it's a problem that gets worse the closer you look, not better. This story explains the labor. It does not explain the accuracy. Because moving stone, that's cheap. Give 100,000 people enough rope and enough years, and they can drag almost anything anywhere. But precision, real mathematical precision, you cannot sweat your way to that. You cannot brute force a tolerance tighter than what modern satellites can achieve. Precision is knowledge. And that's exactly where this story starts to fall apart. Here's the trap the standard explanation keeps falling into. Every time historians answer who moved the stone, they act like they've also answered how it was made this exact. Those are two completely different questions. One is about muscle, the other is about mastery. And nobody, not one Egyptologist, not one textbook, not one museum placard, has ever fully closed that second gap. That gap is where the machine went to work. So the AI didn't start with aliens, it didn't start with lost continents. It started with the most boring question an engineer could possibly ask. Is the ground level? And that single, unglamorous question is where the official story began to collapse. Anomaly 1. A flaw that breaks the laws of probability. Picture a stone platform bigger than several football fields laid end to end, more than 230 meters on each side. Now, here's the number that should stop you in your tracks. Across that entire footprint, the surface deviates by barely 2 centimeters total. Let that sink in. 2 centimeters across, a slab the size of a small neighborhood. Imagine a pane of glass the size of a city block, and from one edge to the other, the difference between the highest point and the lowest point is smaller than the width of 2 fingers. That's not a poured slab of concrete from a single mold. That's millions of individual stone blocks, cut and placed by hand, one at a time. And somehow, when you step back and measure the whole thing, it's almost perfectly flat. No laser levels, no lasers period, no satellites, water, rope, wood, that's it. The AI ran the numbers. Given only period-accurate tools, what's the probability of hitting and holding this level of flatness across the entire structure? Statistically improbable, that's the verdict. Not impossible, improbable. The kind of outcome that should fail far more often than it succeeds. Heat warps water levels, cords stretch in desert sun, tired hands drift. And here's the gut punch. We don't even build to this standard today. Modern skyscraper foundations are allowed looser tolerances than this 4,000-year-old tomb somehow nailed by hand. By our own modern engineering standards, this floor is roughly 10 times more precise than it needed to be. A tomb doesn't need this. The dead don't care about slope. So why go this far? Think about the sheer discipline this demanded. Every section of that base had to be checked, rechecked, corrected, checked again under a blazing desert sun that heats stone unevenly and dries out water levels at different rates throughout the day. Tired crews, long shifts, weeks stretching into months, every single one of those factors should have introduced drift. Small mistakes should have piled up the way they always do on massive, hand-built projects. They didn't. Or if they did, someone caught every single one and corrected it before it mattered. Either the builders stumbled into this by accident, or the precision itself was the entire point. Anomaly 2, aimed at the unmoving center of the sky. The floor was strange. What came next was worse. The 4 sides of this pyramid don't roughly face north, south, east, and west. They are locked onto true north with an accuracy of about 3 arc minutes, 3 out of 21,600 possible arc minutes in a full circle. That's the size of the error. You could not see it, you could not feel it, you would need an instrument just to prove it exists at all. And here's what makes this insane. True north isn't what a compass shows you. A compass follows the magnetic pole, and that thing wanders constantly. True north is the Earth's actual spin axis. There's no landmark for it, no rock, no signpost. The only way to find it is to watch the stars wheel across the night sky for hours, locate the single fixed point they all rotate around, and then transfer that invisible point down into a straight line and hold that line true across 230 meters of construction. The AI flagged this instantly. This isn't folk accuracy. This is the kind of alignment we achieve today with GPS and survey-grade transits, tools that wouldn't exist for another 4,500 years. So ask the obvious question: why does a tomb need this? No worshipper standing at the base could ever detect a 3 arc-minute error. No ritual depends on it. This level of precision serves no practical purpose whatsoever. When accuracy this extreme outruns necessity by this much, you're not looking at a byproduct anymore. You're looking at a message. Someone thousands of years ago pointed a mountain of stone at the fixed center of the sky, knowing that almost nobody would ever notice except someone patient enough, far enough in the future to measure it. Someone just did. And here's what should really unsettle you. This wasn't a one-time lucky guess at the stars. Achieving this kind of alignment requires sustained observation, night after night, tracking the same slow rotation across the sky, refining the measurement over weeks or months until the error margin nearly vanishes. That's not superstition. That's not guesswork. That's methodology. That's something startlingly close to what we'd call professional-grade astronomy today. For a culture we're told was still early in its development, that's not a small leap. That's a chasm. Anomaly 3, a circle hidden inside a square. Next, the AI grabbed a tape measure and a calculator. What it found should not exist. Take the full perimeter of the base, walk all 4 sides. Now take the original height before the outer casing and capstone was stripped away by time. Divide one by the other. The answer lands almost exactly on 2 pi, the same infinite irrational number that connects a circle's circumference to its radius, a number that never repeats, never resolves. A shape made entirely of flat triangles and straight lines has a circle hidden inside its bones. Now, there's a reasonable explanation for this, and the AI gave it a fair shot. Ancient builders likely measured ground distance by rolling a drum and counting rotations. Roll a wheel enough times, and pi sneaks into your numbers by accident. The wheel does the geometry for you without anyone ever knowing its name. For one measurement, fine. That explanation holds. But the AI wasn't looking at one measurement. It scanned the entire structure and found this same pi relationship showing up again and again at completely unrelated points in the geometry. Points that share no common measuring method, no shared rolling drum that could explain them all at once. So it calculated the odds of that happening by pure chance. The number wasn't comforting. In any other field, that result forces you to throw out the word coincidence completely and reach for a much more dangerous word: intention. Anomaly 4, the number that didn't exist yet. If pi had a loophole, this next number had none. It's called phi, the golden ratio, 1.618, forever without end. The proportion your eyes find beautiful without knowing why. hidden in the spiral of a seashell, the branches of a tree, the seeds inside a sunflower. Here's the problem. According to every written record we have, phi wasn't formally described by anyone until Greek mathematicians wrote it down over 2,000 years after the final stone was set on this pyramid. 2,000 years, that's the distance between us and the Roman Empire. By every account, this number simply did not exist yet. The AI found it anyway, not once. In the ratio between height and base, in the exact slope angle of the triangular faces, in hidden internal proportions, deep inside the structure that no rolling drum could ever accidentally produce. Here's why this one can't be explained away. You cannot stumble into phi. There is no innocent tool, no honest measuring mistake that quietly slips the golden ratio into your blueprint. To use phi, you have to already understand it, calculate it, apply it on purpose. The final count. At least 7 independent places in this structure where a proportion that supposedly wasn't discovered for another 2 millennia is sitting there encoded in solid rock. One instance may be an accident. 7, that's not an accident anymore. That's a signature. Here's why this detail hit the machine harder than almost anything else. Mathematics doesn't normally show up finished. It climbs. Every civilization we've ever studied builds it slowly. Basic counting first, then simple shapes, then centuries later, the deeper, more abstract relationships. We can trace that climb step by step in the Babylonians, the Greeks, the mathematicians of ancient India. But here, at what's supposedly one of the earliest major engineering feats in human history, there's no climb, no early failed attempts sitting nearby, no simpler structures showing the math slowly maturing toward this. Just this, fully formed, fully realized, dropped into the historical record, with no visible warm-up act. Either that warm-up act is buried somewhere we haven't found yet, lost under sand, or swallowed by a river that shifted its course a dozen times in 4,000 years, or it happened somewhere else entirely, in a place and time we haven't identified. And what's standing at Giza isn't the beginning of this story. It's a later chapter of one we haven't read yet. The climax, a planet folded into stone. And then the AI turned its attention outward, from the building to the entire planet it's sitting on. It took the pyramid's original height and multiplied it by one number, 43,200. The result matched, to a margin that should not be possible by chance, the Earth's actual polar radius, the distance from the planet's center straight out to the pole. Then it took the full perimeter of the base and multiplied that by the exact same number. The result matched the Earth's equatorial circumference. Same multiplier, 2 different measurements of the pyramid, 2 different measurements of the planet, as if this tomb is secretly a scale model of the entire Earth, built at a ratio of 1 to 43,200, with the actual size and shape of our planet hidden quietly inside its stone. That number, 43,200, isn't random either. It's the number of seconds in 12 hours, a number tied directly to the spin of the Earth itself. To pull this off, someone in the 3rd millennium BCE would have needed to know that the planet bulges slightly at the equator, that it isn't a perfect sphere. That's a detail we didn't confirm with real precision until the era of satellites. Who knew this? And having known it, who decided the right move was to bury that knowledge inside a mountain of stone, in a code that would take 4,500 years to crack, stop, and really sit with what that would take? Roughly estimating a landmass with travel time and known routes, sure, ancient cultures managed crude versions of that. But measuring the actual curvature of an entire planet distinguishing pole to center distance from equator to center distance, that demands understanding that the Earth isn't a perfect sphere at all, that it bulges. That's not a measurement you back into with a rope and a stick. There is no comfortable middle ground left standing here either. This is the single greatest coincidence in the history of construction, one that has to survive 5 separate statistical longshots stacking directly on top of each other. Or someone somewhere actually measured this planet with a precision we didn't rediscover for thousands of years, and chose to bury that knowledge in the one material built to outlast everything else: solid stone. Stacking the evidence. Let's be clear about what the AI actually said. It did not name a builder. It did not say aliens. It did not point at a lost continent and declare victory. It did something quieter and far more unsettling. It looked at the textbook story: copper tools, wooden sledges, 20 years, and it ruled that story insufficient. Not fake, not a lie, insufficient, unable to explain what's actually sitting in the sand at Giza. A floor flatter than it had any reason to be, an alignment tighter than any ceremony required, pi repeating at points with no shared method, phi appearing 7 separate times 2,000 years before it was invented, and the dimensions of planet Earth itself folded into the height and base by a number pulled straight from the clock of a spinning world. One of these, maybe a coincidence, all 5, stacked on top of each other, that's not noise. That's a pattern, and it doesn't stop there. The AI kept pulling threads, and every thread led to the same uncomfortable place. Deep inside the structure above the king's chamber, engineers built a series of massive granite slabs, some weighing as much as 80 tons, stacked specifically to redirect the crushing weight of millions of tons of stone above it away from the burial chamber below. 80 tons lifted, positioned, and locked into place with such precision that the ceiling underneath hasn't cracked in over 4,000 years, not once, not during earthquakes, not during millennia of desert heat expanding and contracting solid stone day after day, year after year. Modern engineers studying this system today still call it a masterclass in load distribution, the kind of thing you'd expect stamped with a modern engineering firm's logo, not credited to a crew swinging copper chisels. Then there's the Sphinx, a short walk from the pyramid, carved from a single mass of limestone bedrock. Its body shows deep vertical weathering grooves, the kind of erosion geologists overwhelmingly associate with prolonged heavy rainfall. Not wind, not blowing sand, water, sustained, repeated water damage carved into solid rock over a long period of time. Here's the problem: Egypt, during the era this monument is supposed to have been carved, was already a desert. It hasn't seen rainfall on that scale in thousands and thousands of years, long before the pharaohs, long before the dynasties we credit with this construction. For that weathering pattern to make sense, whatever lies beneath it would need to be dramatically older than the official timeline allows. None of this closes the case on its own. The AI was careful about that, and so should we be. But stack it on top of the floor. The alignment, pi, phi, and a planet folded into solid stone, and this stops looking like scattered curiosities. It starts looking like a body of evidence with one shared conclusion. The story we were told isn't wrong about everything. It's just missing something enormous. 4 possibilities. With the textbook explanation under pressure, 4 possibilities remain. First, a lost Egyptian technology, advanced engineering, astronomy, and mathematics that somehow disappeared from history through war, fire, or time. Second, knowledge inherited from an older, forgotten civilization that existed before conventional history and passed its techniques to the Egyptians. Third, survivors of a global catastrophe roughly 12,000 years ago, carrying fragments of advanced knowledge into the civilizations that followed. Fourth, an origin that was never human at all, an idea the AI refused to completely eliminate because the evidence didn't rule it out. The AI didn't choose one. That's your job. So based only on the evidence, precision, alignment, pi, phi, and the Earth's measurements encoded in stone, which explanation do you believe? Tell me in the comments. Because this investigation didn't begin with belief. It began with a machine examining numbers that had been sitting in plain sight for thousands of years. And once you see those numbers, you can't unsee them. The trail doesn't end here. It's only page 1.